Hello friends, before going into today's topic, I would like to tell you one thing, that other than your home or house, the next place that you spend the most time in is your office or workplace, isn't it? Right. So when you spend 9, 10 or 12 hours in your workplace, don't you think health and safety should be one of the major concerns at your workplace as well? Yes, right? So today we will discuss about the health and safety procedures and policies that should be there in a workplace. So today's topic would be workplace health and safety, right? So before going into the details of workplace health and safety, let us understand that how do you manage health and safety in your business. So when you are running a business or a company, how do we manage health and safety? So let us see, when we are running a business or when we have a company, how do we manage health and safety in the business? The first point would be set your health and safety objectives and plan. How will you achieve them and how will you achieve them? We must set our health and safety objectives and plan and see to it that how do we achieve them. Decide who would be responsible to getting things done. Means I have a policy, I have made a policy, I have made certain rules, but who are the people are going to get things done, or who are the people are responsible to look after the health and safety procedure? Next would be give those responsible people the needed skills and resources to do so. Now, if the people who are taking care of health and safety in your office are not given their needed skills and resources, probably the entire management of health and safety would not go as per your objective. The fourth point would be regularly check that you are meeting your objective. So there has to be a periodic check, as in whether whatever objectives we have set or I have set for the company or the business, is it running smooth or not. So understanding these 4 points, we will get into understanding of certain questions that we need to ask ourselves when we are running a business or a company, that what health and safety management arrangements do we have in place now, and find out how the current health and safety process or performance is going, and is there anything that we could change or review or change the policy or the procedural of health and safety. Now before understanding or before going and understanding that, to find out the current status of health and safety, we need to ask certain questions to ourselves. So the questions are there any elected health and safety representatives? Are they trained? Is there a health and safety committee? Is it functioning? Do you have a general health and safety policy? Is it in writing? Do you have policies to deal with particular specific health and safety issues in your workplace? Is there a systematic written procedure for identifying hazards and assessing risk in your workplace? Has the workplace health and safety inspection program been introduced? Is it working? Are health and safety aspects always considered when operating procedures and work instructions are developed? Is health and safety always considered when planning, designing or purchasing new equipment or processes? Do you have written operating procedures for all normal operations? Do new and transferred employees receive instructions in your health and safety policies and procedures? Is there a procedure and timetable for reviewing workplace procedures? Now continuing with the questions, there are few more questions that we need to also ask. They are, do you have procedures for emergencies and first aid? Do you know how well you perform a health and safety? Do you know if you are meeting your own standards for health and safety? Is health and safety performance taken into account when assessing the performance of supervisors and managers? And what do your employees think of your safety standards? Are all injuries, ill health and incidents recorded, investigated, reported if required and analyzed for trends? Is this information made available to managers and employees? After understanding these these questions, we very well understand that how important is health and safety policy for a particular company or business. Now, next point would be of ours to understand the preparation of a general health and safety policy. Now, preparing a general health and safety policy is a very important practical step for any business for providing and maintaining a work environment which is safe and without any risks to health. Because you don't want to go to an office or company wherein you are spending 12 to 14 hours a day next to your home would be full of risks to your health and or is not safe for you. So it is a perennial duty, it is the most important duty, just like you're maintaining quality and production of a particular company, to maintain health and safety as well. Coming to the slide to understand the basic, what is there in the general health and safety policy, we have to understand that a properly prepared health and safety policy should clearly states. Now, a properly prepared health and safety policy should clearly state health and safety objectives, means what are the objectives the company is setting towards health and safety, organization's commitment to improve health and safety condition. Now, there should be a continuous improvement in the health and safety conditions in the company. Thirdly, it should acknowledge employers' legal responsibilities. Means employer has a legal responsibility towards his employees to keep health and safety policy for the company. That should be acknowledged in the policy that a company is creating. So preparing a health and safety policy is an important, very important practical step towards providing and maintaining a work environment which is healthy as well as safe. Now, next question that we come to understand the health and safety policy would be, how do you prepare a general health and safety policy? Now, how do we prepare a general health and safety policy? Now, preparing a successful policy would require consultation. That would be discussion from the elected health and safety representatives. Number one, means people who you have or your company have elected as health and safety representatives. Number two, nominated management representatives, people from the management who is going to supervise the entire policy. And third, employees. You just cannot rule out this point. So these three sections has to be taken together in consultation before preparing a successful policy of health and safety. Now, what should a policy actually include? Now, before discussing the making of policy or procedure, let us understand what should a policy include. Means the issues that should be covered in a policy should include senior management commitment. As you can see in the slide, it is in detail, but I would just go into the brief of understanding certain points. The first is senior management commitment. Second is the integration or well-working of that commitment. Now, if there is a commitment of a senior management to look after health and safety, secondly, the integration or the well-working of that commitment is equally important. Third is a commitment to establish the functions and roles of all the people in the organization. Accountability of all levels of management for implementing health and safety. Now, the importance of consultation and cooperation between management and employees, that is very important, because if the employees does not coordinate or the coordination is very negative between the management and the employees, you cannot just run any policy. Then training in and communication of health and safety practices and procedures. So it is very important that there should be a training as well as there should be communication of the procedures that we have in our company about health and safety. And lastly, commitment to regular monitoring, which is at times becomes very, monitoring becomes neglected. It's a neglected word. At times it does become, because if you don't monitor regularly or periodically, what happens? You may not know what improvements you have to bring in or what changes you have to bring in. Now, the policies and procedures need to work, they need to be tested thoroughly before implementing. Now, employees engaged in an activity must clearly understand the relevant health and safety policy and be able to follow written procedures as well as when appropriate. Next, we come to the understanding of difference between a policy and a procedure. Now, what is a difference between a policy and a procedure? Now, a policy, as you see in the slide, is a statement about an issue at the workplace and states where the management intends to do what the management intends to do about the issue. A procedure, on the other hand, gives a step-by-step instruction on how to deal with an activity in a workplace. So policy is basically written, procedures are also written, but procedures are more about the instructions, that how would you, if there is an activity, there is something happening, how would you step by step go about and give a solution to the entire thing. After this, understanding of policy and procedure, or the difference between policy and procedure, let us understand what does a policy describes. Now, there are 3 to 4 things or 5 things that a policy describes. A policy describes a desired standard that a company wants to have, a specific objective to meet, means if I am setting out a policy about anything, it has to have a specific objective to meet. Third, it has to have a time frame, means we have to give a deadline or a time frame within what the objective we are supposed to or we want to meet. Next, management's commitment to fulfill the policy. Then steps to be taken to implement the policy as well as expectation from all employees in relation to this particular issue. Now, management's commitment to fulfill the policy is very important, as well as the steps to be taken to implement the policy is very crucial, because on that probably it will depend that whether your policy becomes successful or not. Now, where there are workplace hazards and risks to health and safety, the procedure sets out to what to do at every stage of the activity. Just like the policy describes certain 5 elements, the procedure actually describes if there is a hazard happening or there is an activity that has taken place, what step-by-step instruction is given to come out of that hazard or to solve the situation. Now, let us come to the understanding after this, the activities that may have specific procedures, means what are the activities that may have specific procedures. Now, they can be working in confined places, resolving issues, if you have to resolve an issue or if there is an issue, what is the step-by-step instruction to solve the issue. Evacuation, now if there is a threat and you have to evacuate the entire building of the office, so in that case, the procedure must be there, as in step by step how do you evacuate, or how do you take on with the process. The overall workflow from the materials coming into the workplace to the final product going out, so it has a procedure. How the materials coming in, to what stage it is going, to what department it is going, and how the final product is going out. Now, this kind of activity does require procedures, or it has to be procedural. Now, next comes is your workplace instruction. Definitely, at what time do we come, what do we do in our office, what is restricted, what is given as to what is given to us, what permission, in what things we do have permissions, what are the things that is restricted for us. So for all these things we need instructions. So here the procedure has a role or a part to play. Then comes your administrative policy like purchasing. So here in these few examples we can understand how the procedure works, and therein we can also understand the difference between procedure as well as the policy. Now, how do you establish specific health and safety policies and procedure? Now, how do we establish in a company specific health and safety procedure as well as policy? There are 5 steps we need to understand point wise, but first we need to understand these 5 steps. Now, what are these 5 steps? Number 1, we need to identify workplace hazards and issues. What are the hazards or issues that can come to our workplace or may affect our workplace? We need to identify them. How? We will learn that in the following or preceding slides. Next is collect information about the hazardous activity or issue. Now, after identifying the issue or the hazard that may affect our workplace, we need to collect information about the hazardous activity or issue. Now, Step 3 would be preparing the policy or procedure depending on the first step and the second step, right? Now step 4 would be implement the policy or procedure. Once you have prepared the policy or procedure, then you implement the policy or procedure. Step 5 would be review and make changes if required. Now definitely when you are making a procedure or a policy, you would always expect that there should be a periodic check. Now in the periodic check, you must understand you need to review them and make changes if required, because if a policy is not working fine or if a certain thing is not working fine with your company with regards to health and safety, you need to change it very periodically, or you must check periodically so that there can be a change, there would be changes or not. Now understanding these 5 steps, I would like to give you an example. Now suppose your company or your office is situated in such a place where there is a factory just beside it. Now there is a smoke which comes out from the factory, which is maybe dangerous or hazardous for the people, or it is a poisonous smoke. Now you have identified that this is a hazard or an issue which you have to solve. Probably being a management person in your office, you might identify this, that this can be a hazardous situation in your office. This is identifying, that is your first point. Next is collect information about the hazardous activity. You have to collect information as in what the gas is, or what is the smoke is all about, how much hazardous it can be, or how can it be controlled. Next is you have to prepare a policy or a procedure to, so that you can come out of that situation. Now how do you do that? It is entirely upon the management to decide that if you have an office nearby to it, whether you make your people sit nearby to the factory, or how would you going to manage it. That is when you create the policy or the procedure. Now implementing the policy and procedure is also very important. Why? Because you need to see that none of your people are getting affected due to that poisonous smoke that is emitted by the factory or the workplace or workshop that has been just near to your office. And then review and make changes if required. If you see the policy is going great, then no need of making changes. If you see that the policy is not working well, probably you need to see to the changes. Coming to step 1, or understanding the identification of workplace hazards and issue. Now how do we understand the workplace identify workplace hazards or issues? How do we do that? So there are few things that is written in the slide, so we will discuss on that. Number 1, walk around the workplace and look at what could reasonably be expected to cause harm. If you walking around the workplace and if you see there is shortage of wire somewhere, or anybody who touches a switchboard, or there is a switchboard which is not working well, or the earthing is not well, suddenly if a person who is working in your company may touch that and may get shock or electric shock, that is where you find out that okay fine, this can be a hazardous situation, I need to correct that, or I make sure that nobody comes near this entire wiring where there is probably you cannot do, in a day you cannot solve the problem in a day, probably you can restrict people to come to that zone of your office. Second, have a look back at work-related accident or ill health records. These often help to identify the less obvious hazard. Now, if you go through the records and the trends of your office to understand that what has been the trend of, health as well as accident in our office. So, in that case, probably it will help you to understand that what, steps do we need to take to rectify them. Consider inspection reports, results of adults and other records of reviews of work activities which may inform the process. Ask employees or their representatives what they think. They may have noticed things that are not immediately obvious to you. Now remember to think about long-term hazards to health, that is harmful effects of repeated exposure to chemicals which may cause skin irritations and or sensitization. Check manufacturers' instructions or data sheets relating to equipment or chemicals, as they can be very helpful in spelling out the hazards and identifying safe work practices. I would just give you a small example. When we buy a cream or a ointment, we always check the instructions or the manufacturer's instruction at the back that do not put this in your sensitive area or around the eyes. Now this is an instruction which let us understand, okay, this can be harmful or this can be hazardous. Just like that, if you are bringing in new equipments or chemicals into your office for your official work, do understand, check the manufacturer's instruction as to see whether they can be hazardous or not. Next would be, if you are a member of a professional organization or a similar body, contact them. Many produce very helpful guidance. So if you have any contacts, they may come and tell you what can be hazardous or not for your office. Hazards in healthcare may be considered under the headings of physical, chemical, biological and psychosocial hazards. Now some examples are given below. So in hazards, if you consider hazards in healthcare, there are 4 categories: physical hazard, chemical hazard, biological hazard as well as psychosocial hazard. We will look into these 4 types of hazard in the following slide. So we will continue with the step 1, that is identifying workplace hazard and issues, and we will understand the different kinds of hazard. The first comes physical hazard. Now what is physical hazard or what it includes? It includes manual handling activities involving heavy, awkward or hard to reach loads where there is a risk of injury. Suppose as a worker or your employees has to carry huge sheets of glass. Now that is something which is risky or which can be risky. Now if the glass falls off or the person might get injured seriously, so that can be a physical hazard. Vehicle movement, whether in the workplace or on the road, which can cause serious injury or death to people who come in contact with them. Now suppose your office is on the highway where there is no signal, and the moment you get out of the office and you have to cross to get another bus, make sure that the vehicles, see the vehicles and cross. Otherwise you might get run over by a vehicle. Why? Because you may not have proper stoppage boards. Now here I can give you a small example. In Calcutta, or I think in all the places where there are schools and you have to take a particular bus route, you would see just before approaching that particular school there is a board, slow down, there is a school here, or slow down, school here. Why? Because they know that the buses that would come very fast with a big speed maybe or a huge speed, they might not be able to control if a child comes in front of the bus. So they warn very early, is much before the school approaches. They give a warning as in that don't be slow, or ask the vehicle or the drivers to be slow as there is a school. Same we can apply here, or we can do here if we really care about the safety and health of the people working in our office. Now the third physical hazard would be slipping and tripping hazards such as wet or poorly maintained floors. Now as we are working in office, we all know we have to go to the restrooms, right? Now if the restrooms are not periodically checked or there is too much water, so we can trip, or we can, it can become slippery and we can trip and fall down. That can create a hazard for us because we don't know how many people can take that slipping and be alright. So this also comes as your physical hazard. Going to the second category, continuing with the first step, would be your chemical hazard. Now what is a chemical hazard? Chemical hazard is caused by hazardous cleaning, disinfecting or sterilizing agent. Now suppose you are using certain sterilizing agent or disinfectant. Now you might not know that it can be hazardous, because the chemical in it might become hazardous for some people. Some people might be allergic to it, and some people might not be able to take the poisonous smell. We don't know, but then we can always check into this category. Then next comes your biological hazard. What is a biological hazard? These include any virus or bacteria that can cause infection, allergies or toxic effects. For example, harmful exposure to blood and body fluids or exposure to airborne pathogens would lead to dangerous diseases like tuberculosis and Legionnaires' disease. So if we know that, we would very well understand that if we are facing some sort of these things in our office or company, we must stop that, because our employees' health would be at risk then. Next comes your psychosocial hazard. Now psychosocial hazard is something which is to do with the ragging and bullying of your peers or colleagues. Now there would be certain people, who might not take the bullying or the ragging very lightly. So they may take it very seriously, and that may cause a very psychological problem in his head. So we must see into it that these kind of hazards are avoided when we are working in the office, or we are managing our office or business. Now there are some examples where written procedures may be required. Now what are these examples? They are specific workplace hazards, investigating incidents and issues with corrective actions, that is reactive and response activities, as well as administrative activities such as record keeping and purchasing, like legal responsibilities. Now when we come to specific workplace hazard, it has relation to identification and assessment of the risk control, reporting hazard, issue resolution, consultation on proposed change, workplace inspection. When it comes to reactive and response activities, it would be such as first aid and medical emergencies, reporting illness, injury, reporting incidents and dangerous occurrences. And when it comes to legal responsibilities, it should be in relation to contractors, visitors, injury records, health monitoring, complying with new regulations which apply to the workplace. Now in all these cases we need written procedures. That is what we are would be the right thing to do in a company. Now to determine priority, we need to ask, means which is more important. We need to ask these three things. Is the activity or the hazard causing frequent or severe incidents or ill health? Number 2, is the hazard or activity new to the workplace? Now number 3, how important is the issue to the employees? Now when we are understanding the priority of a particular hazard, we have to ask these three questions. First question would be that, is the activity or the hazard causing frequent or severe incidents or ill health? Now if it is very severe, it has to be taken into care as a first priority. Number 2, is the hazard or activity new to the workplace, or it was already there and we did not check, or we need to change or review our policy regarding it. Number 3, how important is the issue to the employees, means are the employees taking it really seriously? Now next we come to the understanding of step 2. After identifying the particular hazard or an activity, we need to come to the step 2, which is collecting information about the activity. Now after identification, we need to collect information. Now how do we do that? What information must you collect? The cause of the hazard and the factors creating the risk, relevant legal standards or requirements, possible control measures, and workplace factors which will affect implementation of the policy or procedure. Now these are the information we must collect if we are handling a hazard, or we have to come to a solution about a hazard happening or affecting our company. Now next question would be, where do you find the information or the source of information? Health and safety representatives, employees, regulations, standards, code of practice, investigation reports, consultants reports, your records, knowledge and experience, product and equipment specifications. So these are the source wherein you can get the information about the hazard. And next is health and safety representatives and employees probably would be the most important people or information source who can give you information about the hazard that has happened in your company. Health and safety representatives, why? Because they are there for that particular thing. Secondly, employees, because they are concerned about their own health, they are working there, so they would definitely inform if something happens which is not good for their health as well as safety. Now you need accurate and up-to-date information to ensure each policy or procedure contains the most effective and preventive strategy. So here we come to step 3, that is your preparing the policy or procedure. Now understanding the preparation of the policy and procedure, how do you write hazard policies? Now a policy, as we have discussed before, is just a repetition. A policy should be a statement of commitment, goals and standards and responsibilities. Now, and it should also set out how it should be implemented. I make a policy or I write a policy, but I don't know how to implement it, has no use. It is useless. So I must know, if I am making a policy, if a policy is made, how it can be implemented. So a policy should include these following sections. A statement of the purpose of the policy means what is the purpose of the policy. The statement of legal duty of the management, like what is the legal duty of the management towards the employees. Organization's commitment to controlling the hazard or issue at its source, means from the very start, as in ended in the nip it in the bud, that we say in English. That is, at the very start, control, organization's commitment to controlling, means organization should commit that they would control it from the very start. An outline of how the hazard or issue will be controlled, including resources to be provided and a time frame for action. The roles and accountabilities of relevant stakeholders, particularly managers and supervisors, and how the policy would be implemented. That is very, very important. Now, it is very important to consult with employees with preparing policy and procedures. Employees will be involved with implementing any new arrangements, and because of their day-to-day hands-on role, they are likely to know whether the proposed arrangements will work. If the people who are affected by the procedures or policy are involved in their development, it is also likely that the commitment of making those policies and procedures work will rise. So it is very important that we take into account the employees, consultation, as well as their ideas to implement a policy, because their hands on the role and their continuous daily working in that system definitely affects the procedures and the policies, and the success of a police policy or a procedure depends at most probably 80% on the employees. Now, after policy we come to a procedure. A procedure should include the following sections: a statement of the purpose of the procedure, the standards required from a policy and code of practice, the specific steps to be followed which will ensure achievement of standards and control measures. Now, roles and accountabilities, a clear statement of any actions to be taken when the procedure is not followed. If there is a procedure to be followed and if we are not following that, what action to be taken. Procedures can be written in a range of formats such as work instructions, flow charts, or guidelines. So it can be written in three types of formats. It can be work instructions, given as work instructions, guidelines, or flow chart. After step 3, we come to step 4, wherein we have to understand to implement the policy or the procedure. After making the policy or the procedure, the next very big step comes is to implement the policy or the procedure. Now, how do you inform employees? Now, explaining procedures and policies during an induction training is important. Suppose there is a new joining in your office and you have to give that person new joining induction training. Like every new joining must go through an induction training. During that induction training, if we can tell them or we can train them about the health and safety policy and procedure, that's a great idea. Next would be including information on policies and procedures in a refresher training, and filming and presenting information in a video. You video shoot the entire policy and procedure and you show it to the employees. So these are the three ways wherein you can inform the employees to implement a policy or a procedure. Now, what training will be required? Changing the way people perform their jobs requires training and instructions, right? Yes, training may be rendered before the policy or procedure is introduced. Training may be a part of the policy or procedure, or it may need to occur on regular basis to ensure the policy or the procedure continues to be followed. So it can happen as a part of your procedure or policy. Training can be a part of your policy and procedure, or it can be it can occur on regular basis to ensure that the policy and procedure is carried out successfully. So your policy or procedure should specify what training will be undertaken as part of the implementation. Means to implement a particular policy or procedure, what training or how the training should be imparted to the employees. Continuing with the step 4, that is implementing the policy or the procedure, How do you test the policy or procedure? In some cases, you might you might want to introduce a policy slowly or introduce it in stages before implementing throughout your workplace. So at times what happens, if you want to establish a policy, it might not be taken by the employees suddenly. So you may do it gradually, step by step, in stages before implementing it throughout the workplace. To do this, choose pilot areas to test the policy. What do you mean by pilot areas? The important areas or the areas where generally people come and gather in your office. Suppose the pantry area, wherein the people come for lunch, maybe all the employees come for lunch, so that becomes your pilot area. Reception of the company is your pilot area. So you can as well, if you are making a policy on health and safety, you can very well first put it in the pilot area, which is the main area wherein definitely all the people come. Then gradually taking it to the other departments or the other places of your company. And these areas could be chosen on the basis of the work area being representative of the other areas of the workplace, the severity of relevant hazards in the area, or the willingness of employees and management in the area to participate in the test. So there can be three. Either it is actually the pilot area at the important area, the representatives area, wherein all the representatives gather, or it can be the area where maximum hazard happens or a dangerous area of your office, or it can be as per the willingness of the employees and the management, as in this is the area where we can apply this policy and see what it happens. So you should certainly test procedures before implementation with work through the procedure with experienced employees before it is implemented. So in everything we see that the importance and the role of employees becomes very important to implement a policy or a procedure. Next is step 5, that is the last step that we come into, that is review and make changes if required. Now it is important to review and evaluate to find out whether the policy has achieved its purpose or is it really working. Now we need to know that. How do we know that? How do we understand that the policy is really working and it has achieved its objective? The first is the procedure is working or not, the policy is being followed or not, the procedure is always followed or not, new hazard control measures are available or required, or new policies are needed to cope up with the changes to regulation, processes or the workplace. Now to review policies and procedures, we can also create a timetable, as in that within periodically in this time or at this time every quarterly basis we would check into the policy or the procedure of health and safety in our company. Now continuing with step 5, that is review and make changes if required. Where does reviewing a policy or procedure starts? Now it starts with the aims that you have had or you had when you have developed the policy and the procedure. What were the aims that I had in my mind or we had in our mind as management people when we were developing this policy or procedure? In step 1, you identified the needs for specific health and safety policies and procedures in your workplace. Now you will need to review your needs regularly, and whenever there is a change in your workplace, changes such as new process, there is a new process which is coming to your office, or new substance, new regulation, or moving to a different space, or expanding your premises, should be analyzed to see if they introduce new hazards or not. Your policies and procedures should be modified to reflect the changes, and new policies and procedures may be required or not. The objectives in your policy should be clearly stated. You will be checking to see if these aims are being reached. For example, if you have developed a policy to stop smoking in your workplace, you will be checking to see how well the entire policy is being taken around, or whether you have achieved in this aim of yours or not. Procedures are usually more straightforward. You will be checking to see if the procedure is always followed without difficulty, or you have given a step-by-step instruction but it cannot be followed, it has some difficulty, that is why it is becoming a hindrance to follow. So you must check into that. Second, the procedure is the most effective one for the activity or hazard or not, whether this procedure is the most effective for the particular hazard, or we need to change the procedure. The procedure results in the activity being carried out safely and without risks to health or not. Now, whether the procedure that I have set for my company, is it being carried out without giving any kind of risk to health and safety or not. Now, these are the very important matter that we need to understand when we are making review and changes if required. Now, what information should be collected? To evaluate a particular policy or procedure, you collect information about how it is being followed and any result that might indicate how successful it is. Collecting this information may involve a survey of employees who are affected by the policy and procedure, a review of health and safety committee minutes, or may issues book and issues raised by health and safety representatives, reports from your health and safety information system, a review of health and safety activities over the previous year, or a walk through the workplace to see how activities are carried out. Now, these are the methods by which you can check on that, you can collect the information, or whether there need to be a review or there should be changes in the particular policy or procedure. Next, understanding this, we come to the organizational emergency procedures. Now, there are certain list of incidents that is covered as an emergency procedure of an organization. Now, what are these incidents? Let us discuss these incidents one by one. The first is fire incident. If there is a fire in your company, or if there is a breaking of fire in your company, what is the emergency? This is an emergency situation. So, what is how the entire procedure has to be carried out? What is the procedure of coming out of this fire or evacuating the entire office building would be? That has to be listed. Medical incident. If somebody falls suddenly sick, or have a heart failure in your office, what do you do? What is the procedure? Next is civil disturbances, power outrage, as well as explosive device. If there is a threat of an explosive device in your company, now what is the procedure of going step by step, or the step-by-step instructions that you need to follow or we need to follow to come out of the situation which is a dangerous issue. Now, after understanding these, we need to understand the need to be listed. Means these are the particular things or phone numbers or contact numbers which needs to be listed as emergency, like primary contacts, emergency response team members, crisis management team members, floor marshals, roll call, head counts list, first aid trained personal emergency service providers, contact numbers, then emergency contact numbers for all employees, vendor contact numbers, call trees for employees, contractors and vendors, floor plans with detailed information, and building evacuation drills. These are your emergency points that you need to be listed in your procedure or with your procedure. Why? Because if there is an incident, emergency incident like a fire incident or a threat incident happening in your office, you need to follow, you need to understand, you have to contact these people urgently on an urgent basis. Now, after discussing workplace health and safety for so long, understanding the different various ingredients or points about a policy and procedure, steps of building up a policy and procedure, here we come to a scenario, basically, because sometimes you have to understand as students or you are preparing for exams of workplace health and safety that every question or the questions that comes in the form of MCQs may not be always related to what is there in the content of the book. It may be on the IQ based, it can be IQ based as well, or common sense based as well. So after understanding the entire concept of workplace health and safety, we need to understand that if there are some common sense questions that comes as an MCQ in your exams, how to attempt it. So if you understand health and safety, then you attempt these questions, you would very well understand what would be the right answer. So the first scenario that we are going to discuss now is, what should you do if your colleague suddenly faints and is not breathing? Now, as you can see, there are 4 options given. You should check his pulse and blow air into his mouth. You should make him lie down and place a wet cloth on his forehead. You should tightly hold his shoulder and shake him. You should gently stroke his chest in downward direction. So these are 4 options. Now this has nothing to do with your content of understanding workplace health and safety, but it has everything to do to your understanding of the concept as well as using your common sense. So what would be the right answer? So the right answer would be, as per what I think, and is probably the right answer, as per my common sense tells, that you should check his pulse and blow air into his mouth. Right? This should be the right answer. If we go to the second scenario, let's see what is in there in the second scenario for us. In the second scenario, while working in your system, suddenly your system shuts down. You notice some spark near the wiring of the system. What should you do? You should inform your colleague and take his help to correct the wiring. You should inform the maintenance department and request them to resolve the issue. You should try to check the wiring and correct it on your own. You should request your colleague to share his system with you and work turn by turn. Now, it's a very simple safety question. Use your brains. Now, if there is a policy, if there is a procedure, we need to go in for the second option, wherein you should inform the maintenance department immediately and request them to resolve the issue, because it can cause a huge hazard in your workplace if you don't take into account. So understanding this scenario, we can very well understand what are the important points of health and safety, maintaining health and safety in your workplace, as workplace stands as the most important part of your life next to your home. If you are watching off, if you are keeping security and health and safety at your home, your workplace also stands only second to your home probably. So it is one of the most important part of your area, your life, and as well as your future. So thank you.